How does one's mind shatter? And in a landscape flooded with television, constant surveillance, and artificial reality, what shape does that madness assume? Our tale embarks in the year 2003. A 26-year-old named Andrew Jones is riding a train bound for New York City, and he is practically vibrating with anxiety. His hands are clammy with perspiration, while his eyes nervously flicker across the train compartment, scrutinizing the other passengers as if suspecting they might be observing him. Upon reaching Penn Station, he fights his way through the suffocating crowds, stepping into the frenetic and overwhelming whirlwind of the city. Andrew has journeyed to New York with a singular purpose in mind: to visit Ground Zero. For the last 2 years, the events of September 11th have gnawed at his thoughts. Yet, something about them feels off, unfathomable. He suspects the whole tragedy was an elaborate ruse, a manufactured spectacle, and he is compelled to witness the truth firsthand. As he wanders aimlessly, dazed and bewildered through the city streets, he finds himself captivated by the sight of the United Nations headquarters, prompting an immediate shift in his mission. An intense and urgent need to enter the building overtakes him. He pounds on the glass doors, yet a security guard denies his request for entry. Out of breath, Andrew pleads. He demands to converse with someone. He insists on being granted asylum. Observing a man clearly in distress, the guard steps out to console him. But comfort is not what Andrew seeks. Consumed by confusion, dread, and mounting anger, he takes a swing at the guard. Following a brief altercation, he finds himself under arrest and taken to the epicenter of New York's most acute crises, Bellevue Hospital. Here, Dr. Joel Gold, a psychiatrist, encounters the restrained and agitated Andrew. Despite his uncooperative demeanor, Dr. Gold recognizes the profound psychotic episode unfolding before him. Yet, to provide assistance, he must first grasp what truly occupies Andrew's troubled mind. That is when Andrew Jones unveils what he deems to be the truth. His entire existence, he confesses to Dr. Gold, is a fabrication. Sinister television producers have covertly recorded him for years, orchestrating his every decision and broadcasting his life to the world as mere entertainment. Dr. Gold is faced with the first documented case of a peculiar and distinctly modern psychosis, soon to be known as the Truman Show Delusion. Its roots trace back to a film from 1998, directed by Peter Weir. The movie, The Truman Show, features Jim Carrey as Truman Burbank, a content and ordinary man, blissfully unaware that his entire life is the world's most beloved reality TV show. His seemingly perfect town is one enormous set, and those he considers family, friends, and even his wife are all employed actors performing from a script. As Truman begins to perceive the imperfections in his fictitious world, those around him strive to convince him of his supposed madness.
But he is unconvinced. In a climactic move of courage, he breaks free from his televised confines and enters the real world. For the majority, the film was seen as a clever and intriguing piece of cinema. However, for a 21-year-old Andrew Jones who watched it unfold on the big screen in 1998, it was an epiphany. The notion lodged itself in his mind and refused to leave. What if, he pondered, what if he was also the sole authentic person existence in a world meticulously contrived? In the following months, this singular, unsettling thought completely consumed him. Much like Truman, he became thoroughly persuaded that he was encircled by a cast of performers masquerading as his loved ones, all part of an elaborate scheme orchestrated for a hidden audience. Once this delusional seed was sown, Andrew's perspective of reality spiraled into an altered state. Everywhere he turned, he seemed to uncover hidden messages crafted by the masterminds behind the television show. Even offhand remarks from friends, like the word cool, would suddenly carry immense, concealed significance, indicating that they were in on the plot too. His mind was tirelessly on the hunt, desperate to unearth proof of this dreadful new world he found himself in. In the movie, Truman desires to escape to Fiji, an island on the opposite side of the globe, as he believes it's beyond the show's influence. Echoing this thought, Andrew attempted to book his own escape, a plane ticket to a distant land. Yet the exorbitant cost of flights thwarted his plans. This setback spurred a more daring scheme. He decided to journey to Ground Zero in New York City, convinced in his warped reality that the horrifying 9/11 terrorist attacks were merely an elaborate ruse engineered by his show's producers, a spectacle concocted for viewership. He believed that if he managed to reach the site and expose this alleged deceit, the illusion would shatter, the show would come to a halt, and he would at last be liberated. This desperate logic drove him to New York, leading to his subsequent arrest and bringing him to the doorstep of Dr. Gold at Bellevue. Here, Andrew divulged the depths of his paranoia, claiming that the producers had even implanted minuscule cameras behind his eyes to capture everything he witnessed. Escape, it seemed, was impossible. For half a decade, Andrew had been ensnared in this intangible prison. Before Dr. Gold could formulate a treatment plan, Andrew was relocated to a hospital nearer to his home. Yet his case lingered in Dr. Gold's mind. It was one of a kind. Just a few months later, it was as though lightning struck yet again. Another individual arrived at Bellevue exhibiting the same symptoms. His name was Ben. Much like Andrew, Ben had been pulled to New York City from somewhere far away, drawn by the bizarre allure of his delusion. Following his viewing of The Truman Show, Ben's psychosis had taken root, leading him to believe he was being pursued and filmed by a mysterious global entity. But Ben's condition was even more critical. The relentless pressure of being under surveillance had escalated to such extremes that he contemplated ending his own life. Yet, in his mind, there lay one final escape route. He hallucinated interactions with the show's creators, who tasked him with a last dramatic feat. They claimed that if he climbed the pinnacle of the Statue of Liberty, he would meet his high school girlfriend, secretly a fan of the program, awaiting him. Their reunion would mark the show's climax, and he would ultimately be free. The alternate proposition was dire. If he reached the top and she did not appear, he would leap. To Ben, suicide had transformed into the sole alternative to extricate himself from this contrived reality. However, upon arriving at the Statue of Liberty in 2003, he found it remained closed to the public since 9/11. His dramatic closure was thwarted. Lost and dispirited, he found shelter at a homeless facility, where his outlandish tale led the workers to escort him to Bellevue and the care of Dr. Joel Gold. Inside his office, Ben disclosed the disturbing intricacies of his beliefs to Dr. Gold. He stated, "I was, and continue to be, the focal point for countless individuals. My family and acquaintances were and are cast members in a scripted act." Dr. Gold began crafting a treatment approach. Initially, Ben appeared to cooperate, but it turned out to be mere pretense. In his mind, the doctors and nurses were simply performers in this unfolding hospital drama of his imagination. As the weeks passed and his aspirations to flee were repeatedly dashed,
his sense of despair intensified. He found himself slipping back into wanting to end his own life. Eventually, Dr. Gold was faced with a tough call. Bellevue couldn't ensure Ben's safety, so he was moved to a long-term state facility. But even after Ben's departure, Gold found himself preoccupied with the two cases.
It was more than mere happenstance. Two individuals from distinct regions manifesting the exact same unusually specific delusion, one that was previously unrecorded. Remarkably, he had encountered them merely months apart. It appeared as if they were afflicted by a new, distinct disorder that had eluded the attention of medical professionals until then. Lacking sufficient evidence with just two cases, however, he couldn't categorize it as anything more than a peculiar form of psychosis. With a heavy heart, Dr. Palman,
Gold decided to set aside the enigma as he had other patients who needed his attention, unaware that at that very moment, across hundreds of miles, another young individual was beginning to succumb to the same terrifying illusion. This young university student is whom we will refer to as Charlie. In 2007, Charlie started his first year of college. A creative spirit with a love for the fantastical and science fiction, he pursued a degree in film.
However, campus life did not meet his expectations and felt like a brutal letdown. Making friends was a challenge, and he became overly self-conscious, plagued by the thought that his peers judged him for his lack of popularity. He withdrew, hiding away in the comforting solitude of his dorm room. Internet surfing and working on his film projects became his escape routes, allowing him to flee reality for a while. And he found an ally in his escape.
he started misusing Adderall, a potent stimulant, keeping himself awake for days, consumed by his work. For someone without ADHD, Adderall can wreak havoc by throwing dopamine levels into chaos, stirring up severe anxiety, sleeplessness, and, in some situations, sparking temporary episodes of psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, and erratic paranoid ideas. For Charlie, this drug wasn't a mere escape. It was the fuel for the blaze about to engulf him.
Adderall only heightened Charlie's already profound anxiety, prompting him to turn to alcohol for solace, thus embroiling himself in a destructive cycle. Drinking led to blackouts, leaving him to awaken in the grip of fear and with blank memories about his actions, haunted by the dread that he might have behaved in a humiliating way. This anxiety drove him further into the embrace of substance abuse.
Over time, his dread honed in on one specific terrifying thought. Could someone have filmed him during one of these blackouts? Could there be a video so humiliating that it circulated online? Gripped by this consuming obsession, Charlie established a nightly regimen. Clawing through his classmates' social media, he scoured for the damning footage he was convinced existed. Though he never found any trace of it, the absence of evidence offered no solace, only aggravating his paranoia.
If not on their profiles, it had to be lurking elsewhere. His thoughts twisted into more sinister and elaborate shapes, evolving from a fear of being recorded to a certainty that he was under constant surveillance. He became utterly convinced that an invisible presence was scrutinizing his every online move and even keeping tabs on him through his laptop's webcam. He started noticing cryptic messages, seemingly tailored just for him, appearing on the websites he browsed.
What began as social anxiety in Charlie had rapidly spiraled into a delusion where he felt targeted and pursued. For many months, he kept this disturbing perception under wraps. Yet this delusional world was growing stronger, breeding in the solitude of his dormitory. By the time he returned home for the summer break, the delusions broke loose into reality. One evening, his mother, Gretchen, discovered him in the corridor,
dismantling the household thermostat. He was meticulously inspecting each component with an air of urgency, as though uncovering a buried secret. When she questioned his bizarre actions, Charlie turned to her with an unfamiliar, intense look in his eyes. "I am searching," he replied with unsettling composure, "for the cameras hidden in our home." His mother grew deeply worried.
Despite this, Charlie maintained a sense of rationality and quickly attributed his strange conduct to stress and his Adderall prescription, minimizing the seriousness of the incident. Nonetheless, Gretchen grew extremely cautious. She was very reluctant to permit him to attend the upcoming Rothbury Music Festival. Recognizing these events as notorious for drug use, she feared exposing him to further temptation was the last thing he needed.
However, the festival was the sole source of joy in her son's increasingly bleak existence. He implored her not to take it away. Gretchen proposed a compromise, an ultimatum. He could attend the festival, but only on the condition that he admit himself to rehab immediately afterward. Charlie agreed without hesitation. With that tenuous promise set, he headed to the concert that would forever alter his life. Once at the festival, the fragile promise he made to his mother vanished.
He swiftly encountered a dealer and purchased a mix of acid and ecstasy. The drugs quickly began to influence him, and he drifted through the immense crowd, his paranoia simmering just beneath the surface, his eyes perpetually scanning for unseen cameras. When he found himself near the main stage as the Dave Matthews Band began their set, a shift occurred within his mind as the ecstasy reached its peak. The melodies transformed, no longer mere music.
The lyrics transcended their original meaning. They were messages meant for him alone. The band, to his astonishment, seemed to be narrating his life. They sang of his solitary and difficult freshman year as if they knew it all, revealing his personal story to the entire audience. In that electrifying but frighteningly clear moment, everything seemed to align. The paranoia, the hidden messages, the sensation of being watched, it all seemingly had a purpose.
Charlie believed he was the unsuspecting star of the most extravagant hidden camera show ever conceived. Every individual at the festival, indeed every person in the world, had been watching him. This event was the climactic conclusion. All he needed to do was step onto the stage and claim his reward. Yet, as he attempted to act, the drugs made his movements awkward and sluggish. He found it impossible to maintain a grip on his phone to call his father for assistance. As the music faded, he watched helplessly as his chance vanished. However, the delusion persisted. Even after the effects of the drugs subsided, the altered reality lingered. At dawn, his sister discovered him anxiously pacing outside their tent. He had not slept a wink. When she questioned his state, he turned towards her with an unnervingly ecstatic grin.
"Smile," he urged. "You're on camera." But the eerie intensity in his eyes chilled her to the bone. His sister, filled with a gut-wrenching apprehension, realized with certainty that something was dreadfully amiss. She reached out to their parents, alerting them to Charlie's downward spiral. With urgency, the family stepped in, insisting that Charlie abandon the festival scene and instead make his way directly to a rehab facility in Montana, fulfilling the promise he had made.
Yet, for Charlie, this rehab was just another elaborate stage in the grand drama that played out in his mind. When a staff member informed him that he would be closely monitored, Charlie saw it as irrefutable proof. Naturally, they would observe him. The cameras were omnipresent. Throughout his stay, he would randomly yank open closet doors,
convinced he would uncover hidden camera crews.
His erratic behavior was a deliberate attempt to shock the supposed production team, hoping to break their facade. The staff soon realized that Charlie's issues went way beyond substance abuse. They relayed to his parents that his level of psychosis was beyond their capability to manage. Consequently, Charlie was sent back home.
It was there, in the comfort of familiar walls, that he laid bare his truth to his mother. He was, in fact, the leading figure of an international TV show. In the throes of uncertainty, his parents clung to the hope that this ordeal was merely a transient, drug-fueled episode. They encouraged him to return to college for his second year, hoping for a fresh start. Charlie assured them things would indeed be different this time around.
In his mind, this signified that the producers could no longer pull wool over his eyes. He saw himself no longer as a pawn in their game. Christened with the knowledge of the game's rules, he set out to play it for himself. The shift was nothing short of extraordinary. Once withdrawn and reserved, Charlie emerged as a true performer. He became a class clown, signed up for acting courses, and his social world thrived. No longer was he just the show's protagonist. He was learning to revel in the role. Venturing into journaling, he scribbled thoughts aimed at his supposed millions of devoted spectators. However, his delusion took a sinister turn, morphing into something more pervasive and troubling. He began to discern a disembodied voice which spoke to him within the confines of his mind. Convinced this was the voice of the show's producer, Charlie believed it informed him of a new upgrade. A minuscule speaker and microphone had been implanted in his brain while he slept. This technological leap meant that not just his actions, but his very thoughts were broadcasted to the world. Even his dreams were set to be aired. The producer's voice rationalized this as a necessity to boost the show's appeal. Charlie had been too mundane, it seemed. The voice started handing down directives, dictating bizarre and demeaning tasks like balancing on a single leg for hours or incessantly dashing up and down stairs throughout the night. It morphed into a relentless critic, disparaging his looks, urging him to shed pounds by starvation. Charlie obliged with each demand. Upon returning home after his second year, he confided in his mother about the voices haunting him. She implored him to consult a psychiatrist. Yet Charlie declined, driven by the fear of forfeiting what he perceived as the ultimate prize, a staggering $100 million promised by the voices, a significant leap from the original $1 million. He dreaded that any slip-up, any hint of disobedience, could strip him of his recompense. For the time being, therapy was out of the question. His mother's unwavering determination eventually paid off, persuading Charlie to meet with a therapist. During these sessions, however, he proved uncooperative, omitting the most extreme aspects of his delusion. Nonetheless, the therapist managed to arrive at a general assessment. Charlie was grappling with delusional disorder of a persecutory type. A delusion entails a fixed, unshakable conviction in something that starkly contradicts reality. Charlie's delusion was a complex blend of this and other forms. It was grandiose, for he truly believed he was the most significant person in existence, the central figure in a worldwide spectacle. And he genuinely felt pursued. He was convinced that an all-encompassing external force was threatening and manipulating him, and that everyone dear to him was part of some grand deceit. Within the field of psychiatry, delusions are split into bizarre and non-bizarre categories. A bizarre delusion is something that defies reality, like believing oneself to be made of glass.
A non-bizarre delusion, on the other hand, encompasses things that are extremely unlikely, yet not altogether impossible. This is where Charlie's delusion took hold in such an unsettling way. In today's world, filled with reality television, smartphones, and a culture obsessed with instant celebrity, his fundamental belief that he was under constant, secret filming was considered non-bizarre. It was within the realm of possibility. But there was a substantial hiccup. Throughout his therapy, Charlie omitted to mention the voices. He never spoke of the supposed speaker and microphone that he imagined were embedded in his head. This was the truly bizarre component of his psychosis, and without this pivotal insight, the therapist could not reach a comprehensive diagnosis. Charlie withheld the essential key that might have unlocked his mental prison. Then, one day, the voices in Charlie's mind spun a new, life-altering narrative.
To finally secure his ultimate reward, they instructed him to join the cast of Saturday Night Live. Comedy had never been on his radar, yet the perceived producers in his mind insisted. All he had to do was fly to New York, stride into 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and have a meeting with the iconic creator of the show, Lorne Michaels. According to the voices, the casting directors had been viewers of his show for years. He was deemed a guaranteed success. One chilly Saturday, Charlie did just that. He ventured to the iconic location and confidently approached a security guard, stating he had a meeting with Mr. Michaels. The guard, unfazed by yet another hopeful performer, gently informed Charlie that entry was impossible without a scheduled appointment. At that moment, the producers in his head fell silent. There were no whispered tips, no secret phrases to utter. It was a test, and he needed to bypass the guard on his own. But he was unable to. Disheartened, Charlie found himself alone in the grand lobby, understanding for the first time that this show, his purported life's calling, had fortified itself into an impenetrable cage. He wandered back to the famed Rockefeller ice rink amidst the throngs of tourists, and something unexpected happened. Or rather, nothing at all. He was unremarkable to those around him. No one asked for his autograph. For the multitude swirling around, he was completely unnoticed. And thus, for the first time in ages, a fracture appeared in his delusional world. He pondered an obvious question. How could his supposed all-powerful producers orchestrate thousands of actors to fool him throughout his entire life, but failed to get him past a lone security guard? Despite the brief moment of clarity he had experienced in New York, Charlie's delusion endured. By the conclusion of his third college year, he resolved to leave school and move to Los Angeles to be closer to the film industry. Yet, his parents stood firm. He would not be allowed to live with his father until he saw a psychiatrist. His mother, Gretchen, was dealing with a heartbreaking revelation. For months, their mailbox had become a repository for returned envelopes, over 200 in total. Upon opening them, she discovered they contained desperate letters that Charlie had sent to countless celebrities, pleading for their assistance. He believed that these fellow famous individuals would understand his predicament and aid him in escaping his show. One particular letter stated, "I find myself trapped in a relentless cycle of mind control. My career and life lie in shambles." This devastated Gretchen. She was unaware that the delusion had intensified to such a grave and desperate level. For a long time, her son had consistently turned down any substantial help. But then, something shifted. Shortly after discovering the letters, Charlie approached her, announcing that his producers were at last granting him permission to seek treatment. It remains a mystery what triggered this sudden turn of events.
Perhaps his intense desire for freedom finally overpowered the narrative spun by the voices in his mind. Whatever the cause, in June of 2010, Charlie took a significant step forward and consulted with a research psychiatrist at UCLA. For the very first time, he confessed the entire truth. He opened up to the doctor about the voices plaguing him.
With this crucial insight, the doctor was at last equipped to begin treating Charlie, not just for a mere delusion, but for a full-scale psychosis. Charlie had finally embarked on the path to recovery. Equipped with a diagnosis and prescribed medication, he could commence the long and challenging journey of distinguishing fantasy from reality. His delusion, though terrifying, had predominantly been a self-made prison, a solitary performance for an imaginary audience.
But this leads us to a more sinister and unsettling question. What transpires when the delusion shifts from feeling grandiose to feeling utterly persecuted? What unfolds when the sensation of being watched transforms into the certainty of being pursued? To find the answer, we venture to a peaceful suburb in Sydney, Australia. A 42-year-old man named Alex is behind the wheel, heading to his sister's house for dinner. He opts for the back roads, as is his custom. It's his way to steer clear of unwanted notice. In his mind, a storm of troubling thoughts and voices swirls, growing louder as he nears his family. For years, ever since the passing of his mother, his behavior had turned erratic. He became convinced that his own father and sister were masterminding an extensive plot to destroy his life. They kept him under constant watch. Privacy was non-existent, not even for a fleeting moment. Even while alone in his car, he was certain he was being observed. Upon reaching the house, his sister claims the dinner is meant for mending their relationship, but Alex knows otherwise. It's a trap. He has come to believe that his family possesses the ability to control his thoughts. He has convinced himself they wish to end his life. During dinner, the auditory hallucinations crescendo, reinforcing his gravest fears. As he gazes at his father and sister watching him eat, he doesn't perceive concern in their eyes. He sees a murderous intent. He's convinced they're attempting to stop his heart with their thoughts. He decides it boils down to self-preservation. Alex seizes a sharp knife from the table and lunges forward. He violently stabs his father and sister countless times. He doesn't halt until he is certain they've drawn their last breath. As the frenzy subsides, the voices fall silent. Alex lets the bloodied knife drop, strolls calmly to the kitchen sink, and washes his hands. He then steps out the front door into the fading sunlight, leisurely walking down the still suburban street, his shirt stained crimson with his family's blood. He harbors no fear that someone might see him. He has no concern that someone might alert the authorities because, in his mind, this horrific and merciless double murder was all merely a part of the show. Alex's case was profoundly unsettling, in part because it is exceedingly rare for individuals experiencing the Truman Show delusion to resort to violence. Yet, even with the roaring media storm that ensued, the general public's understanding of the condition remained unchanged. Most medical professionals continued to dismiss it. That was, except for a pair of New York-based intellects, the Gold siblings, Joel and Ian, a psychiatrist and a philosopher, respectively. These two were becoming the foremost authorities, possibly the only ones, on this peculiar variant of madness. They made a significant mark in the field with their 2014 publication, an influential book titled Suspicious Minds: How Culture Shapes Madness. Within its pages, They posited that delusions are not arbitrary. Rather, they mirror the culture birthing them.
The Truman Show Delusion, they claimed, served as a chillingly ideal case in point. As Dr. Gold delved deeper into these peculiar incidents, a disturbingly consistent trend began to surface. The individuals involved were predominantly young men in their 20s, many facing struggles with substance abuse. The correlation between drug use and psychotic episodes is well established in medical circles.
Recreational substances, especially stimulants and hallucinogens, can act as potent instigators for psychosis, particularly for those with a genetic predisposition to mental health issues. Even marijuana, often perceived as benign, has been linked to an elevated risk of schizophrenia in vulnerable individuals. Alcohol, too, plays a role. While it isn't proven to cause persistent disorders like schizophrenia, excessive consumption can certainly induce temporary psychotic episodes and severely worsen symptoms of pre-existing conditions.
The early patients, like a certain individual named Charlie, seemed to exemplify this pattern seamlessly. Their attempts at self-medicating through drugs and alcohol appeared integral to their escalating paranoia, ultimately spiraling into all-consuming delusions. Initially, the explanation seemed straightforward. The Truman Show delusion appeared to be a unique manifestation of drug-induced psychosis. For a while, the connection appeared unquestionable. Substance misuse seemed to be a key catalyst for this delusion. However, then a new case arrived at Dr.
Gold's doorstep, unraveling this neat theory. The patient had no history of drug or alcohol abuse, nor any clear catalyst for his delusions. His name was Tom. His psychotic symptoms emerged during the summer following his sophomore year of college. Yet his experiences were a stark contrast to Charlie's narrative. Tom wasn't an anxious and withdrawn student. Quite the contrary, he was thriving both academically and within his social circles.
A successful freelance artist, he enjoyed a lively social scene and seemingly adored his life. But with the onset of summer and the disappearance of his regimented college routine, Tom's regular habits also dissipated. He reversed his sleep-wake cycle, spending endless nights immersed in his art, sleeping through the daylight hours. This drastic shift in routine seemed to unlock his psychosis. During a road trip to Colorado with friends, his behavior grew increasingly erratic.
He would often grin and laugh without explanation. When questioned about his amusement, he'd merely state he was feeling better than ever. One evening, he scaled the roof of their rented house, gazing at the stars for hours. Alone under the expansive sky, something cemented into place within his mind. He had a revelation. There were recording devices scattered worldwide, concealed within birds and squirrels, equipped with minuscule cameras in their eyes. His every action was being documented.
The following day, he descended from the rooftop, wandering through the neighborhood in a state of euphoric bewilderment. As he passed strangers on the street who bore a faint familiarity, he concluded that the same actors must be recurring in his show. He stumbled upon it, an intriguing house sporting a for sale sign. This, he realized, was the jackpot. As he peered through the windows, searching for any signs or hints, the police showed up.
However, Tom refused to take the situation seriously. He burst into laughter, praising the officers for their impressive costumes and performances. He was adamant that one of the officers was the same actor who had portrayed his fourth-grade teacher. To him, this was all a part of the show's grand climax. Yet, the strangest aspect of Tom's tale wasn't his delusion. It was how he bounced back. Merely a month later, after he returned to his parents' home, Tom awoke one morning to discover his mind had cleared entirely.
The delusion had vanished, never to reappear. His case defied explanation. He had no history of substance misuse, and his sudden, spontaneous recovery was unheard of. But his symptoms unveiled a compelling insight.
The constant surge of euphoric energy that lasted a month, his incessant smiling, laughter, and the sensation of being at the center of an enormous cosmic play matched perfectly with the clinical portrait of a classic manic episode. A manic episode involves a period of excessively heightened emotions and activity. Thoughts race, impulses take control. A person might unexpectedly spend a fortune they do not possess or feel a profound connection to the universe.
Critically, mania can be triggered by intense stress, or, as in Tom's scenario, by a significant disruption of sleep patterns. A single prolonged manic episode often suffices for doctors to diagnose bipolar disorder. Much like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder is a severe mental health condition that may include phases of intense psychosis with hallucinations and chaotic delusional thinking. Newly discovered evidence indicated that the Truman Show delusion might not have a singular origin.
It could be ignited by schizophrenia, substance abuse, or the extreme highs of a bipolar manic state. The plot was thickening, with the links to schizophrenia, drug abuse, and bipolar disorder coming to light. The medical underpinnings of the Truman Show delusion were starting to crystallize. The film seemed to serve as the cultural catalyst, the final component that shaped the psychosis with its unique modern form. That is, until Dr. Gold encountered a patient who challenged everything, an exception that didn't fit the timeline. A patient named Kyle also struggled with bipolar disorder and the classic Truman Show delusion. Yet his case file contained a perplexing detail. His initial experience with the delusion was in 1989, a full 9 years prior to the release of The Truman Show. Kyle, a skilled sailor wary of technology, sought refuge on the open sea. But even in the farthest reaches of the ocean, he believed he was perpetually watched, receiving cloaked messages from his producers. His delusion ebbed and flowed with the manic and depressive cycles characteristic of his bipolar disorder. By the time the film hit theaters in 1998, it did not trigger his delusion. For Kyle, it served as the ultimate confirmation. It validated his secret, frightening reality. His case was groundbreaking. It suggested that the Truman Show wasn't the root of the delusion at all. It was simply its most famous manifestation, representing a cultural anxiety already simmering, a deep-seated fear of being observed that was seeping into the collective subconscious. And the culture was racing to keep pace with this delusion. As reality television took off in the new millennium, so did the reality of widespread surveillance. In 2013, the world discovered the National Security Agency was covertly gathering the phone data of millions of its own citizens. Numerous studies have since shown that most people are well aware that private companies are tracking their every digital move, and even their actions offline. The dread of being watched, surveilled, and exposed has shifted from being just a paranoid fantasy to a well-documented technological reality. This, as the Gold brothers suggest, is the rich ground where the Truman Show delusion thrives. The intense beliefs of these patients are merely a pathological reflection of authentic, deep-seated anxieties of our modern age. Consider Charlie before his descent into psychosis. He was deeply afraid that internet companies were gathering his browsing data, and it turned out he was correct. He was anxious that his most mortifying moments might be shared globally, open to ridicule. In our world of viral content, such a fear is entirely justified. His foundational worries were not delusional, they were legitimate. So what flips the switch? What is the mechanism that spirals a reasonable fear into a full-blown, irrational delusion? According to the Gold brothers, the answer lies in the clash of two core systems within the human brain. The first is the suspicion system. This is the deeply ingrained survival instinct we inherited from our ancestors.
It is the internal siren that blares when you hear hurried footsteps chasing you in a dark alley. Your heart pounds. Your breathing becomes quick and shallow. It is the fight or flight response built to shield us from physical threats. But fast forward to the 21st century, our biggest fears no longer involve saber-toothed predators. They concern public embarrassment and invasions of our privacy. Our primal suspicion system has adapted to respond to these modern social threats.
In individuals suffering from the Truman Show Delusion, this system spirals into overdrive, crafting a whole narrative to manage the overpowering dread. In a healthy mind, there exists a second system that provides equilibrium, the reflective system. This is the rational inner voice. It is the part of us that holds back irrational thoughts. You might experience a minor headache and, for a fleeting moment, panic that it's a brain tumor. But then your reflective system intervenes, calms you, and assures you it's likely just a commonplace headache. Yet, in the minds of those grappling with the Truman Show delusion, this equilibrium is disrupted. The suspicion system diminishes the reflective system. The delusion gains more strength than their logical reasoning. They find themselves unable to pause and question whether their engulfing fears are justified.
And this neurological short circuit, the Golds posit, intensifies with the introduction of new, unfamiliar technologies. Many of us are not fully aware of how our smartphones or the web actually function. This lack of understanding makes it challenging to discern which technological fears are rational and which are merely paranoid. When a psychosis takes hold, the mind clings to these fears about technology, striving to find coherence in the mental chaos. But this is hardly a novel occurrence.
History is replete with similar instances. In the 14th century, following the advent of clear glass, King Charles VI of France became convinced he was made of glass and feared breaking into pieces if touched. During the 1930s, the era when radio flourished, the first instances of broadcast delusions emerged, where individuals believed their thoughts were being broadcast through this unfamiliar medium. The Truman Show delusion is simply the latest expression of this historical pattern.
It surfaced when reality TV and widespread surveillance technologies became a common aspect of life. This suggests that someday, as these technologies become commonplace, this specific delusion may fade away, only to make room for a new one, inspired by whatever peculiar new technology arises next.